Hi everybody, this is week 9 of Graduate Statistics. It's video lecture 2. Previous video we went over, kind of gave an overview of what we've done in the class so far in very broad strokes. And we ended saying that today the topic is how to run inferential statistics when we want to test hypotheses about differences between more than two means. And the test that we use for that is the analysis of variance, which implicates a different sampling distribution. Instead of having the t distribution, we'll have the f distribution to compute our probability of observing the patterns in our data under the null hypothesis. Note that the process is really the same. What's changing is the particular statistic that we compute. In the case of t-test, it was a t-score. In the case of the z-test, it was a z-score. In the case of ANOVAs, it will be an f-score to compare to our f distribution. Without further ado, let's start with a problem that will create the need for this analysis. Vocabulary score and class, social class. Learning vocabulary is a very important part of learning a language. The more words you know, the more you'll be able to understand what you hear and read, and the better you'll be able to say what you want to say when speaking or writing. Importantly, professional success depends in critical ways on thinking and communication skills, which rely heavily on having a good vocabulary. Not surprisingly, research has shown that a person's vocabulary level is the single best predictor of occupational success. This astounding discovery can be illustrated by a study made with managers in 39 large manufacturing companies. Below are the average results of an extensive vocabulary test, averaged and grouped by hierarchical level. So take a look. Floor bosses, foremen, superintendents, managers, and presidents and VPs. If you look at their vocabulary test scores, which is on the x-axis, you see how the vocabulary score kind of increases as managers go up in the managerial hierarchy. Now, of course, with a study like this, we cannot say that having good vocabulary causes you being at a higher up position in a managerial hierarchy. But if that's the case, if there is a causal relationship expressed here or behind this data, then if you do something to change vocabulary scores, you can actually start affecting the kinds of jobs people get. So, one question we can ask, and we will explore here, is whether vocabulary knowledge is related to social class. If it is, and if a causal linkage can be established, perhaps vocabulary learning could be an important target for educational interventions designed to reduce disparity in professional opportunities arising from socioeconomic background. So look at how research is important and data analysis is so important for you guys that will be in corporations and in communities doing work to improve people's lives. If you identify that there is a factor that is helping inequities happen, and one thing might be, and that's the question we're gonna try and approach. One of these factors might be that people from lower socioeconomic classes are having less opportunities to develop and expand their vocabulary knowledge. As a result, they may end up not expressing themselves as well, not communicating ideas as well, and that can put them in disadvantage in getting, good jobs. Right, and having occupational success and climbing the hierarchical managerial ladder in corporations, right? So if we're going to take an anti-racist spin on these things, when we see inequities, what we think about is what could be potential factors affecting those inequities. So we know that there is inequities in social-economic inequities related to socioeconomic backgrounds on how higher up people get in terms of managerial positions in corporations. Then one potential factor is that, people from lower socioeconomic classes might have worse vocabulary knowledge. But this is not, again, an anti-racist approach would say this is nothing related to, it's not in the genes of people from lower socioeconomic classes. It is all about opportunities to learn vocabulary that then would prompt better communication skills that then would lead to better positions. Of course, there's a lot of ifs here. If there is a causal linkage between vocabulary knowledge and success, if there's not just a relationship but a causal linkage, then this could be an entry point for intervention. But first, let's see if vocabulary knowledge is indeed related to social class. So data will be from the General Social Survey. And here is the data set. It's a 10-question vocabulary test, and scores range from 0 to 10. And this is where the score is. The name of the variable for the score is word sum. And this is the response variable. It's a numerical variable. And then we have as the explanatory variable class. And class is a categorical variable with 3 different levels. Middle class, lower class, 4 levels, I'm sorry, not 3, 4 levels. Lower class, working class, middle class, and upper class. What was the vocabulary test like? Well, the test looked like this. Participants would be given a particular list of options that come close. Participants need to choose a word from a list of provided options that comes closest to the meaning of the first word, which is provided in capital letters. Let's look at number 4 here as an example. Edible is in capital letter. Then you have all of these words in lower caps. And the job of the participant is to say, out of all of these words here, which one is closest to edible? Oh, fit to eat. So you got it right. For space, the same thing. What is the closest word here to space? And then you circle it. And then you sum the number of times you got it right. So that's why the score is from 0 to 10. Now, if you were asked to use one of 4 names for your social class, the social class was self-identified, and it was self-identified through the response to this question. If you were asked to use one of 4 names for your social class, which would you say you belong in? The lower class, the working class, the middle class, or the upper class? So it was self-identified. And here is the distribution of vocabulary scores, because again, we have to determine if the distribution follows a more or less normal shape. And this is the distribution across all classes. You can see that it's pretty symmetric. Doesn't look like there is great skew. So this is looking good. And more useful than a general distribution and a way to scan the distribution per group, which is important, then we can see that the distribution is pretty symmetric. For most classes, maybe upper class, a little less so, but the median is pretty close to the middle of the distribution. It doesn't look like there will be great deviations from normal within each of the groups either. Given that, then we can think about doing some descriptive summaries, like numeric summaries. Given that the distribution looks pretty normal, then and the variable is numeric, then mean and standard deviations are pretty good metrics to put numbers in those data distributions. So this is the mean score for lower class, working class, middle class, and upper class. Oh, sorry. This is the sample size for each one of them. And that's the standard deviation of the scores obtained in each one of the classes. And we can see a trend here that goes from lower working to middle, and then upper class is not that much higher than, you know, it's not as much, you know, the degree of change, I cannot talk today, the degree of change between working class and middle class is kind of higher than that, the degree of change between working class and upper class. Upper class actually having a little less, a lower score than middle class. So that's the description. And remember, it's kind of nice to see these summary metrics because it's capturing the essence of what we want to know about. We want to know about differences, average differences between classes on vocabulary score. So this is a very good summary of the data. We can see a nice upward trend here that suggests an increase in vocabulary score as from lower to working to middle class. Not so clear for upper class what's going on. So here's again, one more time with filling our question. Is there a difference between the average vocabulary scores of Americans from different self-reported classes? That's an important piece. One way of trying to figure out an answer to this question, because we did see differences. The question is whether these differences are reliable enough for us to dismiss the null hypothesis that there is no difference between, you know, class has no impact, no difference in vocabulary score across social classes. All right, differences exist, but what is the likelihood of us observing those differences under the null hypothesis? So we need, again, hypothesis tests that will provide us with that probability. So same business as usual. And here I'm saying that you already know one way that we could tackle this problem, which would be to compare means of two groups using a t-statistics. So you could group these things and say, oh, I'm going to look at lower class versus working class, lower class versus middle class, lower class, upper class, so on and so forth. So I'll run a bunch of t-tests. Is that an approach? Yes, it is an approach. Is this an efficient approach? Not an efficient approach. Is this a conservative approach? Not a conservative approach either. Because every time we run the test, we're increasing the chance of finding a difference just by accident, right? So what we do instead, to compare the means of 3 or more groups, we use a new test called analysis of variance, or ANOVA, and a new test statistic called F. When we get back for the next video, we'll go over the process of using ANOVAs to test hypotheses. Okay? See you back then. See you there. Bye-bye. I really can't talk today.